The sun had just come up over the sharp cliffs of Drakemire Island, casting a golden haze over the huge, rolling sea. Mist curled along the rocky shore, like fingers reaching for the sky. A cold wind blew through the village of Thalwyn, shaking shutters and sending the smell of salt and pine through the narrow, cobbled streets. For most people, it was just another morning getting ready for the fishing boats or taking care of goats. But for 16-year-old Kael Rin, it was the kind of day that promised something amazing, though he didn't know it yet. Kael had always been different from the other people in the village. Kael spent hours drawing maps in the dirt with a stick, following the flight of seabirds, or climbing the cliffs to see the far-off horizon. Others trained to swing nets, sharpen spears, or remember the best fishing routes. His mother often worried about him and said, "Daydreams won't fill your stomach, Kael. Dreams won't keep you warm." His father, on the other hand, was a quiet man with stormy eyes. He just patted him on the shoulder and said, "One day, those daydreams will take you farther than any ship." As usual, Kael woke up before the sun that morning, his heart racing with excitement about what was to come. He had heard the whispers of a goon old fisherman telling stories about a huge beast with wings that blocked out the sun and scales that looked like molten gold. They named it the Shimmerwing, which was a type of dragon that hadn't been seen in a generation. The villagers thought the stories were just superstition. But Kael couldn't help but feel drawn to the northern cliffs, where the waves crashed against sharp stone like thunder. Kael ran past sleeping cottages and through the village's winding paths with his leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He got to the cliffs just as the first rays of light hit the sea. The wind was stronger here, pulling at his cloak and whipping at his hair, but he liked it. He looked over the edge and scanned the horizon. For a moment, all he could see was the endless blue and white, with the waves sparkling in the morning sun. And then he saw it. A shadow moved across the water, a shape so big and smooth that Kael couldn't breathe. The sea seemed to split open as it got ready to fly. The scales glowed like gold that had melted, and the wind it made roared in his ears like a real storm. The dragon's eyes were a deep, glowing amber color, and when it spread its wings, the sun seemed to bow down to them. Kael stumbled back, his heart racing. He felt both fear and awe at the same time. The creature landed on a rocky ledge below, and steam came out of its nose. It looked at Kael for a long time, as if it knew him, even though he had never seen it before. Kael's instincts told him to run, but his legs wouldn't let him. The dragon's eyes didn't look threatening. They looked curious, smart, and alive, and something inside. Kael stirred a connection from long ago that he couldn't explain, that made the world feel both huge and close at the same time. Who are you?" Kael whispered, even though he knew the dragon couldn't understand what he was saying. But it tilted its huge head slightly, as if it were thinking about his question. A low, vibrating hum came from its throat and echoed through the cliffs and into Kael's chest. The sound wasn't scary. It was welcoming and almost musical. Kael reached out without thinking, and for a brief moment, he thought the dragon was getting closer. Suddenly, a loud crack rang out behind him. Kael turned to see a group of villagers climbing up the cliff, their faces pale and their voices frantic. "Kael, what are you up to? Get away from that." They yelled and waved tools and sticks. Kael tried to explain, but he couldn't find the right words. The villagers were terrified, and the dragon's wings flared. The morning light caught the golden shimmer on its wings, making its scales shine with dazzling brilliance. Kael made a choice in a split second. He didn't back down. Instead, he raised his hand toward the dragon to calm his racing heart. The villagers stopped moving because they didn't know if he was calling the creature or giving up. The dragon's amber eyes met his again, and then it jumped into the air with a loud roar that shook the cliffs. Kael felt a rush of excitement he had never felt before as its wings cut through the wind with strong, graceful strokes. The dragon landed farther down the cliff, closer to the sea caves where it was said to live. Kael ran to keep up, dodging sharp rocks along the way, his heart racing with every step. When he finally got to the edge of the biggest cave, he stopped to catch his breath and his heart raced against his ribs. The dragon looked at him without saying anything, and the sunlight that came in through the cave entrance made its golden scales shine. Kael finally understood that this was not a monster to be afraid of. This was a person who needed to be understood. He carefully stepped forward. "I don't know why you came here," he said, his voice shaking with awe, "but maybe we can help each other." The dragon lowered its head a little and flared its nostrils, as if it were looking at him. Then it slowly moved closer until it was only a few feet away. Its huge eyes were always on his face. Kael could feel the warmth coming from its body, the gentle beating of its heart, and the way it breathed. Kael gave the dragon pieces of dried fish that he had brought with him in his satchel over the next few hours. The dragon took them with slow, careful movements. He drew lines in the dirt, pointing to himself, and then to the dragon, trying out a way to talk to it. The dragon surprised him by responding with small movements, like nodding, tilting its head, and slightly flaring its wings when it was happy. There was a bond forming, though it was still new. The sun started to go down, and the cliffs lit up with a fiery glow. Kael knew he couldn't stay here forever. The villagers would get more worried, and the tide would rise soon. He said in a soft voice, "I'll be back the next day. I promise." The dragon lowered its head again, as if to say it understood the promise, and then it went back into the cave's shadows, where it was no longer visible. When Kael got back to the village, people were happy to see him, but also scolded him. Kael, his mother, cried and held him tightly. "You could have died." His father just looked at him, quiet and thoughtful, with his hand on Kael's shoulder. He simply said, "I see it," and his voice was full of both awe and warning. "Something is coming to this island. ... double quotes, something that will change everything." Kael lay in his small room that night, looking up at the ceiling. The wind shook the window panes, and in the distance, you could hear the faint sound of a dragon's hum. Kael's mind was full of ideas, questions, and excitement. He didn't know everything about the Shimmerwing yet, or the old story that linked dragons and people on Drakemire Island, but he was sure that his life would never be the same again, and deep down he had a quiet, unshakable hope that he and the dragon, whoever it really was, might be able to find a way to connect their worlds. The sun rose over Drakemire Island again in the morning, but the village seemed quieter than usual. Kael woke up feeling both excited and anxious. The golden-scaled dragon he met last night, which the old fisherman called the Shimmerwing, had made him restless. He knew he couldn't go back to the cliffs until he was ready, because he had seen something that was too amazing to be true. A creature that was so beautiful, it was hard to believe. But he also knew that the villagers' fear was real, and that any mistake could turn awe into terror. Kael put dried fish, rope, and a piece of cloth he had sewn together into a small bag. He cut the cloth from his father's old coat, which was a warm and brave memory. He carefully tucked it away, thinking it might be a peace offering or a sign. When he stepped outside, the morning air hit him with a sharp chill. The cliffs were jagged and scary, but he didn't hesitate. The wind seemed to lead him, bringing with it the faint smell of smoke and salt from the sea caves far away. Kael moved like a shadow as he got closer to the northern cliffs. Before he got to the cave entrance, he saw the telltale shimmer of golden scales through the opening. The dragon was there, resting with its wings folded neatly along its back, and its eyes closed in a rare moment of peace. Kael's heart raced. He had only ever seen it from far away, but now he stood at the door of a creature that was both beautiful and terrifying. He knelt down on the rocks and was careful not to scare it. "I brought something," he said, in a low voice as he held out the bag. He carefully and slowly reached out the cloth to the dragon. The creature opened one eye, which was a molten amber orb that shone with interest. It made a low hum from its throat and flared its nostrils. Kael held his breath as it moved forward, its claws softly hitting the stone, until it sniffed the cloth. Then it pushed the bag toward him with its big snout in a gentle way. The gesture was planned, almost sweet. Kael let out a breath. He thought, "It's trusting me." For the first time, he understood that trust wasn't something that was given. It had to be earned. And to earn it, you would need to be patient, brave, and understanding. He carefully put the dried fish on a flat rock and stepped back a few steps. The dragon looked over the gifts carefully and slowly, glancing up at Kael every now and then, as if to see what he was up to. Then, in a quick motion, it grabbed a piece with its jaws and chewed it slowly before letting out a satisfied hum. Kael spent hours trying out simple gestures, like pointing to the sky and then to the ground, or drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. The dragon nodded, spread its wings, and sometimes let out soft, musical growls in response. Kael learned that the creature reacted strongly to patterns. For example, it would acknowledge repeated gestures, careful eye contact, and calm movements. But it would be cautious or back off if there were sudden actions or loud noises. When the sun was high in the sky, they had started to develop a fragile language, a silent, instinctual understanding based on respect and observation. "I think," Kael whispered to himself, "I think I can ride you." Not sure if that was brave or stupid. The dragon tilted its head, its amber eyes shining, and let out a low, throaty growl. Kael saw it as a sign of support. He spent the next few hours trying to figure out how to get on its back without scaring it. He took small steps, using a ledge nearby as a step and a coil of rope to keep his balance. He spoke softly the whole time. The dragon shifted its weight and spread its wings a little, putting Kael's bravery to the test. He climbed carefully, his heart racing, until he found a safe spot along the creature's spine, where he could hold onto the rope and a fold of leathery wing membrane. The dragon didn't move quickly. Instead, it breathed out softly, as if to tell Kael to stay still, and then it moved its weight forward. Kael's stomach dropped, a mix of fear and excitement. The dragon jumped out of nowhere. Claws scraped against stone, wings opened up, and the world fell away below them. Kael held on tighter, his teeth clenched, and the wind roared in his ears. But he wasn't scared. He was amazed. The dragon rose, and everything below it, the cliffs, the sea, and the clouds that seemed to go on forever, was painted in bright gold and sapphire. With each flap of its wings, they went higher and faster, until they were gliding above the mist and dancing with the thermals. Kael's laughter broke free, loud and clear, and echoed off the cliffs. Slowly, he said softly, getting used to how the dragon moved. It responded by flapping more gently and changing its height and tilt, as if it were teaching him how to balance. Kael's heart raced, not because he was scared, but because he knew he was part of something amazing. He could feel the dragon's heartbeat under his hands, the muscles moving under its scales, and an old intelligence that was guiding its flight. The dragon came down after what seemed like hours, but was only minutes. It landed on a rocky ledge near the cave. Kael slipped off, his legs shaking, and fell to the ground, laughing and gasping for air. The dragon brought its huge head down to his level, and its eyes softened and its nostrils flared slightly. Kael reached out, and the creature nudged him with its snout in a way that was clear that it liked him. Kael whispered, You are amazing. We can do this. We can really make this happen." The dragon hummed back, and the sound shook the rocks and went into Kael's chest, making him feel like he belonged and had a purpose. He finally understood what the old stories meant when they said that dragons were more than just animals. They weren't to be feared or just looked up to. They were partners, allies, and if you treated them with respect, friends. Kael knew he had to go back to the village before people started to panic because the sun was going down and casting long shadows over the cliffs. He gave the dragon one last nod and promised silently that he would come back. The creature opened its wings a little and let out a low, melodic roar, as if to say, "I promise." The walk back to Thawen was full of excitement and fear. Kael knew that what had just happened would change everything, not just for him, but for the whole island. For generations, dragons and humans had been afraid of each other and didn't understand each other. But here, above the cliffs and sea, a bridge was starting to form. When he got to the village, he saw his father standing quietly at the end of the path, his eyes narrowed and deep in thought. He said softly, "I saw you fly. You are braver than I thought. But keep in mind that not everyone will get what you did today. Some will only see fear." Kael nodded, feeling both amazed and responsible. Kael thought about the flight again and again that night as he lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. He remembered the wind, the rush of air, and the connection with the dragon. A spark had been lit deep inside him, a fire that would be hard to put out. He didn't know the dragon's name or what secrets it held in its golden scales yet, but he was sure of one thing. The adventure was just getting started, and high above the cliffs, hidden in the fog. The Shimmerwing watched over him with folded wings and a steady heart, waiting for the next dawn when their journey would begin again. The dawn brought a weak, pale light that had a hard time getting through the fog that hung over Drakemire Island. Kael hadn't slept much because the memory of flying and the Shimmerwing's hum were still fresh in his mind. He knew that today would not be just another adventure. It would test the fragile trust he had built with the golden dragon. Thawen, the village that was so familiar and safe, was no longer just a place to live. It had become a place where choices were made that could have effects far beyond the cliffs. Kael walked quietly through the streets, making sure not to draw attention to himself. Mothers and children moved around, and fishermen got ready for the morning tide. But everyone was looking at him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. He heard whispers wherever he went, voices low but urgent. "Did you see him last night? He's nuts, walking around near the cliffs." Kael didn't pay attention to them and held on to the bag with a cloth and dried fish. He would go back to the northern cliffs today, hoping the dragon would be there. But the cliffs weren't as friendly as they used to be. A thick mist curled around the jagged rocks, hiding their edges, and strange sounds, like the distant crash of waves against stone, the cry of seabirds, and something else, ... A low guttural growl that seemed to come from the ground itself. Kael's heart raced, but not because he was afraid of the dragon this time. It was because he didn't know what was going to happen. He kept going, remembering the small signs and gestures that had made the Shimmerwing trust him the day before. He found the cave, but something was different than he had thought. He remembered the entrance being smaller, but the walls were blackened in streaks that looked like smoke or soot. The dragon's scales glowed golden inside, but there was a lot of tension in the air that Kael had never felt before. Then he saw it, a smaller but just as fierce creature, with scales as dark as the night sky and eyes that looked like burning coals. It moved like a predator, circling the entrance and growling low and threateningly. Kael froze when the Shimmerwing's wings flared up in warning. This was not a normal visitor. It was a rival dragon, and it radiated hostility. Kael's heart raced. He had no weapon or shield, only his wits and the weak bond he had started to build. The golden dragon roared loudly, and the sound seemed to shake Kael's bones. The other side screamed back in a loud, echoing voice, and their wings beat hard against the walls of the cave. Kael stepped forward carefully. He whispered, "I won't hurt it," even though he knew it couldn't hear him. He reached for the cloth and offered it as a sign of peace, just like he had done before. The Shimmerwing leaned in closer and nudged him gently, as if to remind him that he should be careful when measuring his courage. The other dragon stopped and tilted its head, then showed its teeth, which was a clear warning. Kael watched for hours, picking up on the dragon's unspoken language. The golden dragon breathed out smoke in a steady pattern, which meant it was calm. The dark dragon paced and spread its wings, testing the limits of its power. Kael understood that the new person was not only a threat to him, but also to the It wanted to claim the cliffs and caves that had been untouched for a long time. Kael's mind was racing. How could he step in without putting the bond he had just started to build at risk? He thought about the drawings he had made in the dirt the day before, the signs and symbols that the Shimmerwing had reacted to. Kael quickly started to draw again, first pointing to the sky, then to himself, and finally to the other dragon. He moved slowly and carefully, trying to show that he wanted peace, not power. The golden dragon watched him closely and then nodded slightly to show that he was doing a good job. But the dark dragon wasn't so easily swayed. It lunged out of nowhere, its claws scraping against the rock, and the Shimmerwing flared its wings to protect itself. As sparks of stone flew, Kael instinctively ducked, his heart in his throat. Kael knew he had to do something before the fight got worse, as the two dragons circled each other. He took a stick and drew a rough line in the dirt between them, then drew arrows pointing toward the horizon to show where the line was. This is where it ends," he said softly. The Shimmerwing bent its body slightly, which meant it was holding back. The other person stopped, sniffed the air, and after a tense moment, they backed down, folding their wings as if to show they understood the line. Kael's breath was short and uneven, but he felt a rush of joy. The Shimmerwing came closer, its head down and its eyes soft. Kael reached up and stroked the golden scales along its jaw. He could feel how warm and steady its breathing was. "We did it," he said in a low voice. "We kept the peace." For now, the dragon made a deep, vibrating hum that echoed through the foggy cliffs. It was a sound of approval and trust. Kael knew this was just the start, though. The dark dragon's presence was a warning that Drakemire Island had more secrets and dangers than he had thought. Kael saw strange markings on the rock that had been there for a long time and were half buried by time and weather. They were symbols of dragons in flight, humans in strange ceremonial poses, and a circle around both. He ran his fingers over the grooves and felt a chill run through him. These marks were very old, older than the village itself, and maybe even the oldest stories the fishermen told each other. He looked at the Shimmerwing, and the dragon's amber eyes seemed to flicker as if they knew something. So Kael knew that the dragon had picked him for a reason. He wasn't just brave or curious. He had a part to play in a story that had been going on for generations. The marks suggested a connection, a promise between humans and dragons that had to be kept or broken. Kael felt like he had to carry a lot of responsibility, more than any sail or storm. The day slowly turned into night, and the sun made the cliffs look blood-dormant. Kael and the Shimmerwing sat still, watching the waves crash below. The dark dragon disappeared into the fog, leaving a feeling of unease behind. Kael knew it would come back, and when it did, he would need more than just bravery. He would need a plan, knowledge, and maybe even friends he hadn't met yet. The village was on edge when Kael finally got back to People were already scared because of the rumors about the second dragon. People in the village whispered about omens, old curses, and dragons that would bring destruction. Kael's father met him at the edge of the village with a serious look on his face. He said, "You can't do this alone. Drakemire Island remembers old debts. Dragons don't forgive easily, and humans, Humans are often their own worst enemies." Kael nodded, knowing that the peaceful bond he had made the day before was weak, and that the island's history could help him or hurt him. Kael lay in his small room that night, staring at the ceiling and feeling restless. The sound of the Shimmerwing echoed in his head, mixing with the memory of the dark dragon's eyes. He knew better than ever that the adventure was far from over. Somewhere past the fog and the cliffs, forces that were both known and unknown were moving. When the time came, Kael would have to be ready to defend, guide, and accept the fate that awaited him and his golden friend. In the shadows of Thalwyn, the past and the future were mixed up, and the dance of dragons and people had only just begun. Kael slipped out of his small cottage just as the first light of dawn touched the cliffs of Drakemire Island. "You can't do this alone," his father had told him the night before. "Drakemire Island keeps track of old debts." Kael now knew that those words were more than just a warning. They were a kind of prophecy. Something old woke up, and bravery alone would not be enough to stop it. He walked quietly through the village, staying out of the way of people who were already awake. Rumors that dragons were flying near the cliffs had spread quickly, and the villagers were very scared. Mothers held their kids close, fishermen whispered prayers, and hunters sharpened their spears in case of threats they didn't fully understand. Kael kept his head down, his heart racing with excitement and determination as he carried his satchel over his shoulder. The northern cliffs greeted him with their usual majesty, but the rocks were eerily quiet. At first, there was no golden shimmer on the Shimmerwing. Instead, there was a faint smell of smoke and salt. Kael walked along the winding path to the sea caves, feeling both excited and scared. He would go farther today than he ever had before, into a secret valley that lay beyond the cliffs. This was a place that old stories talked about, but few people actually talked about. When Kael got close to the cave entrance, he saw the Shimmerwing sitting on a jagged rock, with its wings half open and its eyes scanning the horizon. It was on edge and tense, and Kael knew right away why. A group of dark shapes flew silently above the cliffs, dragons with dark scales and jagged wings that circled like predators. The rival dragon from the day before led them, and each one moved with careful accuracy. Kael's heart sank. He had hoped that the dark dragon would never come back, but it was clear now that the island's balance was fragile, and that the Shimmerwing's presence alone had drawn attention. The golden dragon looked at Kael with amber eyes that showed both trust and urgency. Kael knew he had to do something quickly, decisively, and wisely without saying anything. He took the folded cloth out of his bag. It was a sign of peace and patience. Kael waved the cloth gently in the air as the Shimmerwing lowered its huge head. The golden dragon made a soft hum that shook Kael's chest and echoed off the cliffs. He took a deep breath and climbed onto the dragon's back, holding on tight as the beast crouched down and then flew into the air. The wind blew through Kael's hair, and the thrill of flying came back in full force. But there was no time to relax. The dark dragon saw them and started circling them more closely, making them look more dangerous. Kael could feel the Shimmerwing's muscles tense up like springs. The creature opened its wings and quickly rose into the air, spiraling up to avoid the first attack. One of the dark dragons flew close, its claws shining in the morning light. Kael ducked without thinking, his heart racing. "Stay calm," "Stay calm," he said softly, trying to calm himself and the golden dragon. He remembered the gestures and signals that had built trust the day before, and he tried them out while flying, using the Shimmerwing's movements to get into the right rhythm. The dragon answered by making a sharp turn and cutting through the air with its wings, avoiding the dark dragon's attacks with an agility that seemed impossible. Kael held on tight, amazed by how smart and skilled the creature was. Hours went by in a blur of wind, sky, and stress. Eventually, the dark dragons left, either because they were satisfied with what they saw or because they were following an unseen hierarchy. The Shimmerwing flew down toward a secret veil that was covered in mist and shadow and had not been touched by people in generations. Kael gasped when he saw waterfalls pouring into pools of crystal-clear water, ancient trees with twisted branches reaching for the sky, and the ground covered in glowing moss that glowed even in the daytime. Kael whispered, This is amazing." The Shimmerwing landed softly on a flat rock near the biggest pool and lowered its head so Kael could get off. The golden scales shone against the green moss, making a beautiful display of light and color. Kael looked around the valley for signs of life or danger. He saw ruins, broken pillars, carvings of dragons and people together, and stone altars that had been left behind a long time ago. This place used to be a holy site where dragons and people met. Kael moved closer to one of the carvings and ran his fingers along the edges. The designs showed a ritual of bonding in which dragons and humans circled each other in trust and understanding. The symbols were like the ones he had seen on the cliffs, which confirmed his suspicion. The Shimmerwing had not chosen him by chance. He was part of a long line of people who were meant to renew the old agreement between dragons and people. The Shimmerwing made a soft humming sound and pushed him toward the biggest altar. Kael saw names, dates, and a string of symbols carved into the stone that looked like they made a puzzle. He ran his fingers over them and felt a strange warmth and a resonance that beat in time with the dragon's heart. It was as if the altar itself remembered the bond and was waiting for someone worthy to fix it. Can you show me what to do?" Kael asked in a low voice, not sure if the dragon could understand him. The golden creature lowered its wings and blew out a cloud of warm, scented air that gently pushed Kael toward the central stone. He took a deep breath and put his hands on the altar, feeling the textures and the small vibrations that were coming from it. The air got thicker, the moss glowed brighter, and a low hum filled the valley. It came from both the altar and the Then something strange happened. The ground shook and the fog got thicker, swirling around them in a dance of light and dark. Kael's heart raced. From the fog, shapes started to appear. They were dark, ghostly forms that looked like the rival dragons he had seen. But they were also ghostly and fleeting, like echoes of ancient dragons. They circled the veil, moving with both grace and menace. Kael knew this was a test of courage and trust, a challenge set by the island itself. He looked at the Shimmerwing, whose eyes were full of determination. Kael climbed onto the back of the golden dragon, which reared back and spread its wings. He whispered, "We will face it together." The dragon's hum got louder and shook Kael's chest, making a bond that was stronger than fear and doubt. They flew up into the air again, facing the ghostly dragons in a sky that was both cloudy and sunny. Kael had never seen a battle like this before. The ghostly dragons moved in circles, poking and prodding at each other to see how strong their bond was. Kael understood that this was not a fight of strength, but of peace. You had to have intuition, timing, and trust for each move. He leaned with the Shimmerwing's movements, feeling the rhythm of its heartbeat and knowing when it would flap and turn. The spectral dragons slowly began to respond, changing their flight to match theirs. This made a dance in the sky that sparkled like gold against the misty shadows. Kael knew they had passed the test when the last spectral dragon came down and bowed its head in a silent sign of respect. The fog lifted, and the hidden veil was fully visible. The waterfall sparkled in the sun. The moss glowed softly, and the Shimmerwing lowered its huge head to Kael, its eyes shining with approval. Kael slid off its back, his hands shaking with excitement. He felt an unspoken promise pass between them. Their bond was stronger, tested, and true. As the sun went down over the cliffs, Kael understood that the hidden veil was more than just a safe place. It was also a place to learn, to make history, and to gain power. The ghostly dragons were not foes but protectors, keeping the trust and knowledge between people and dragons alive for generations. Kael knew that his journey was just beginning. He would have to go out and learn, as well as deal with the problems that were waiting for him and the When Kael got back to Thalwyn that night, the villagers were all worried and waiting. People were scared and amazed by the news of his flight and the golden dragon. Kael's dad gave him a look that said he knew what was going on. He said softly, "You have been to the Hidden Vale, and you have gone through the trials. You are ready. The world outside this island will test you in ways you can't even imagine right now." Kael nodded, feeling both the weight of duty and the spark of fate. He had seen the past, dealt with the present, and felt the future calling. The Shimmerwing stood, far away, its huge shape silhouetted against the setting sun. It was a silent guardian and friend. That night, Kael lay in bed and thought about the day, the veil, the ghostly dragons, the glowing altar, and the connection he had with the golden creature. A fire of courage, wisdom, and purpose had been lit deep inside him. He didn't know everything about Drakemire Island or the dragon's legacy, but he did know that the adventure had gotten bigger and the stakes were higher than ever. The Shimmerwing hummed softly far above, hidden among the cliffs and clouds. It promised to guide and protect them until the dawn brought the next chapter of their journey. There was a lot of tension in the air on Drakemire Island in the morning. The wind brought the smell of salt and smoke, which made me think of the dark dragons that had been flying around the cliffs for days. Kael stood at the edge of the village and looked out at the horizon. The Shimmerwing sat behind him, its wings partly open and its amber eyes looking for any signs of danger. Kael knew that today would be a test of the island's fragile peace, and that courage alone would not be enough. He needed the wisdom, trust, and strength of the bond he had made with the golden dragon. The dark dragons first showed up as shadows on the horizon, and their jagged wings cut through the sky like knives. The other dragon that Kael had fought on the cliffs was in front, its eyes shining with evil intent. The others followed, moving quietly and smoothly, like a predator. The Shimmerwing's heartbeat made a low hum that Kael could feel beneath him. It was a steady rhythm that calmed his nerves. They would work together to meet the challenge. "Stay with me," Kael whispered as he climbed onto the dragon's back. The creature leaned against him, its wings tensed in excitement. Kael held onto the folds of its leathery wings and tightened his grip on the rope. He could feel the dragon's heart beating beneath him. The sky seemed to go on forever, like a huge stage for the trial that was about to happen. The dark dragons flew around, testing their bravery and skills. Kael knew that this was more than just a fight. It was a test of leadership and finding the right balance between strength and trust. The Shimmerwing changed its speed and height in response to his thoughts. Kael started to move with the dragon, leaning into the turns and using small shifts of weight and whispered commands to guide its flight. One of the black dragons flew low, with its claws out. Kael ducked without thinking, and the wind pulled at his hair and cloak. The Shimmerwing roared, and the sound echoed through the valleys and cliffs. The dark dragon turned away, scared for a moment. Kael felt a rush of hope, but he knew this was just the beginning. The other dragon flew around again, which meant it was going to be more aggressive. Kael thought about what he had learned in the Hidden Vale, the trial of the spectral dragons, and how important it was to be peaceful instead of aggressive. He raised a hand to show that he was calm, and the Shimmerwing responded by flaring its wings gently but strongly. They all did the same thing at the same time, diving and weaving through the air with such skill that even the dark dragons were surprised. The enemies hesitated because they weren't ready for how precise and coordinated the golden dragon and its human friend were. Kael bravely steered the Shimmerwing toward the cliffs, weaving through sharp rocks and hidden gaps. The dark dragons followed, but the land was better for Kael and his friend. Kael used the environment to lead the Shimmerwing through tight spaces and over steep drops, which made the dark dragons break formation. The intruders left one by one because they couldn't keep up with the bond between human and dragon. Kael and the Shimmerwing flew over the cliffs with their hearts racing but happy when the last dark dragon finally retreated into the mist. The island was safe for now, but Kael knew that peace would not last. The Shimmerwing landed smoothly on the edge of the cliff and lowered its huge head so Kael could get off. He reached out and stroked the golden scales along its jaw, feeling the warmth and pulse of life beneath his fingers. "You were amazing," Kael whispered in awe. The Shimmerwing hummed back, a deep, resonant sound that made Kael's chest vibrate. It was more than just a sound of approval. It was a sign that their bond had grown stronger through hard times. Kael turned to the hidden vale, the holy place where he first learned how deep the dragon-human legacy was. He understood that the trials, the ghostly dragons, and even the dark dragon's anger were all part of a bigger test. The island had asked for proof of worthiness, and Kael and the Shimmerwing had passed. They had brought back an old bond that had been broken for generations. Kael and the Shimmerwing went back to the village as the sun set, making the cliffs and sea look golden. The villagers watched in awe and with a little bit of fear as the golden dragon landed softly, folding its wings with care. Whispers spread quickly, stories of bravery, courage, and a young person who had gained the trust of a creature that everyone thought was untouchable. Kael's father saw him at the edge of the village and looked both proud and worried. "You've done more than just live," he said in a soft voice. "You have shown that people and dragons can live together and that trust can beat fear. But Kael, keep in mind that this is just the start. There are still secrets to be revealed and challenges to be faced on Drakemire Island." Kael nodded, knowing how heavy those words were. The village had a small party that night. People lit fires, and laughter mixed with the sound of logs cracking. It was a rare time of peace and togetherness. Kael stayed quiet, though, because his thoughts were with the Shimmerwing, which was sitting quietly on the cliffs above. He knew that the dragon had lived for a long time and had a lot of knowledge that people couldn't understand. But they had chosen each other, and that choice would shape their futures. Kael went back to the cliffs and the hidden vale, often in the days that followed. He learned, trained, and explored with the Shimmerwing, finding new ways to talk to, move around, and understand the dragon's world. Each flight brought them closer together and taught Kael to be brave, patient, and intuitive. The island itself seemed to respond, with the winds changing and the mist clearing, as if it were acknowledging the new covenant. But Kael also knew that the dark dragons were not gone for good. Their presence was a reminder of the need to keep things in balance and a warning that wisdom and vigilance were just as important as bravery. Kael promised himself and the Shimmerwing that they would protect the island, honor the legacy of the hidden vale, and face any challenge together, no matter how hard it was. One night, as the sun went down and the sky turned red and gold, Kael sat on the cliffs with the Shimmerwing next to him. He reached out and touched its warm scales. He said quietly, "We did it. We've begun something that could last forever." The dragon let out a soft breath, and a hum filled the air, a sound of friendship, trust, and agreement. Kael knew that the trip was far from over. Drakemire Island had more secrets, more problems, and maybe even more dragons that had not yet been found. But this time he felt ready not just as a boy, but as a friend, a guardian, and a bridge between two worlds. The connection between him and the Shimmerwing was more than just survival. It was also understanding, respect, and a shared future. When the first stars started to twinkle above the cliffs, Kael knew for sure that he and the Shimmerwing would face whatever storms, shadows, or problems came their way together. Because in the sky above Drakemire Island, their bond was unbreakable, their courage was strong, and their adventure was just beginning. The wind whispered through the cliffs, bringing with it the promise of future flights, old secrets, and the never-ending dance between people and dragons. Kael smiled as he closed his eyes and felt the Shimmerwing's rhythm beneath him. The island, the dragons, and the legacy of generations were now a part of his life, and he was ready to honor them every day.